His name is Walt Disney, and he created a worldwide empire built on fantasy and groundbreaking imagination.
Disneyland is your land.
But you might be surprised to learn where he found his inspiration.
The Hollywood Brown Derby was a very famous restaurant in Hollywood. The architecture of the Tam, I think, was definitely inspirational.
Walt really left his footprint on the LA area.
Oh, absolutely. And you can still visit restaurants and some of the sites of where he worked and lived.
Today, we visit those places where Walt Disney worked.
It's a photocopy shop now.
Played.
I didn't know this was Walt Disney's club.
And dreamed.
One of the spots that Walt kind of got inspiration for creating Disneyland.
And maybe, just maybe, a little of that Disney magic will rub off on us too.
Eye on LA presents Walt Disney's Los Angeles, powered by Jeep Compass.
Hi everyone, I'm Eye on LA's Tina Malave, and if you're ready, let's begin to trace Walt's steps throughout Los Angeles.
Walt's first LA home is still standing on Kingswell Avenue in Los Feliz. It was actually his Uncle Robert's home, but the future mogul was welcomed with open arms.
When he first moved out here, he had his only family here in California was his Uncle Robert. So when Walt moved out here, he got his brother to join him, and they lived with Uncle Robert for a while there in Hollywood.
But finding a job in the movie business was tough, so Walt went back to working on his cartoons in the garage originally attached to Uncle Robert's home. This historic garage is now at the Stanley Ranch Museum in Garden Grove, just a stone's throw from Disneyland.
We're about 3 to 3.5 miles away from the park. We have displays on the walls that are pictures and also some things that are from the park that probably came out the back door somewhere. They're not supposed to leave without being destroyed. But anyway, we do have a couple of 3 things there.
And while the memorabilia is awesome, the building itself is the real attraction. Disney-loving tour groups drop by regularly just to stand in the shadow of greatness.
It's where he actually started his career in California. We've had several people comment, well, if you touch the light switch and touch the walls, he very possibly touching a spot where Walt did indeed touch the thing, and he actually was in this garage.
As for Uncle Robert's house, it was purchased in 2016 and was in danger of being demolished, until recently when a new buyer came along.
Walt's granddaughter, who bought Uncle Robert's house recently, is having it restored back to how it was in the 20s when Walt was there, and she's hired an architect to reproduce the garage to put up there on the property on Kingswell, so they'll have something that looks like the garage.
Walt did a lot of experimenting in that little garage, but their animation really started to gain attention when Walt and Roy opened their first studios about a block away from Uncle Robert's house, right here on Kingswell in Vermont.
And that was the Holly, Vermont real estate office, and they rented the back half of that office and started an actual studio there that they called the Disney Brothers Studio. The first series to be done in the Kingswell Avenue studio was the Alice Comedies, which was a silent series about a little girl in a cartoon world, and they were very popular. Then they started with a fully animated series called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit.
It was also where Walt would meet his future wife, Lillian.
Yeah, there on Kingswell, he hired her as a secretary to come in their little operation there. It's a photocopy shop now, and they're very proud of the fact that it was the first Walt Disney studio.
Up next, the high-end supermarket that was once the birthplace of a mouse named Mickey, plus the LA restaurants you can still visit that sparked Walt's creativity.
Today, this is a Gelson's Market, but back in 1926, with the success of the Alice and Oswald series, Walt Disney and his brother Roy made this the site of their brand new studios. And it's here that their lives would change forever.
They built themselves a bigger studio over the hill in the Los Feliz area, and we call that the Hyperion Studio because it's on Griffith Park Boulevard in Hyperion. Sadly, it's not there anymore, but you can still go to a nice store and shop. And there's a plaque on the lamp post out in front. We've had walks around the parking lot and the store and figured out where all the different buildings were once located.
During this time, Walt and Roy built themselves 2 matching houses side by side right here on Lyric Avenue in Los Feliz. And you could call this garage the actual birthplace of Mickey Mouse.
They lost the rights to the Oswald cartoons at that time, so they had to scramble to come up with another character. Les Clark, who was one of our 9 Old Men animators, had just started, and they pulled him in, and they worked in the garage and secretly created Mickey while the other animators were creating the last Oswald cartoons back at the studio.
Steamboat Willie, the first Mickey Mouse cartoon, was released in 1928, and he was an overnight sensation.
Those boys suddenly became very, very famous.
What is the most interesting thing you're doing in the studio now? Well, at the present time, we're making a feature-length cartoon.
When Walt announced that he was going to make a feature-length cartoon, everybody thought he was crazy. You know, there was amazing stories out in the press that, oh, you know, it'll cause headaches and cause your eyes to bleed watching animation that long and those kind of things. And so everybody thought it was just lunacy, and when it came out, it was stunning. It was a huge, huge success. It was one of the highest grossing films, you know, in history at that time. And it made so much money that they were able to build this huge studio over in Burbank because of the funds that they made from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
But there was one thing the Walt Disney Studios on Hyperion didn't have: a place to eat. So for over a decade, the Tam OShanter down the street became the unofficial Disney commissary.
With its storybook style and old-world cottage charm, the Tam OShanter is restaurant royalty in LA. This Scottish pub first opened in 1922 as a roadside stand and diner. When Walt Disney discovered it, he was hooked.
How often was he here?
Yeah, so he was here 5 days a week.
Jeez.
Yeah.
He really liked the Tam OShanter.
Really liked the Tam OShanter.
And so there's a very special place here at the Tam OShanter where Walt Disney used to spend a lot of his time. Can we go and check it out?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to go check out the table?
This is it, huh?
This is it, the famous Table 31 at the Tam OShanter, Walt Disney's table.
Wow.
If tables could talk, Table 31 would tell you this is where deals went down and Walt and his animators got their creative juices flowing. Today, you can even reach out and touch some of those ideas.
You can feel etchings.
Oh, yeah.
And all of the etchings here were done by Imagineers for our 90th anniversary to commemorate Walt's table. We have some dinosaurs over here. What they are is they're the original attractions that Walt would sit here in the afternoons and sketch for Disneyland. So when people come in, they can take a sheet of paper and run their pencil over them and pull off the etchings, which is really neat. A lot of magic was created back here in this corner. And yeah, every once in a while when the restaurant's quiet, I come and I sit down here and I say, this is a special spot.
Want the full Table 31 experience? Ask about the secret menu. It's inspired by the kinds of food and drinks that Walt enjoyed while hanging out in a place so special, he immortalized it in the Disney dynasty.
When the animators were here and Disney was here, they needed an inspiration actually for a project they were working on. It was Snow White. So if you look at the first frames of Snow White and her house, it's actually the original front of the Tam OShanter restaurant, because they sat out in the parking lot and they said, we need the inspiration, it's right in front of us. Let's sketch it. And that turned out to be Snow White's actual house in the movie.
Well, it's clear the Tam OShanter made its way into Walt's creative mind, but there were a few other LA restaurants that inspired Walt as well.
Built in 1935, Clifton's was a cafeteria designed to nourish diners' bellies, while its decor served as a fantasy land, which inspired the imaginations of over 170 million diners, including sci-fi writer Ray Bradbury and Walt Disney.
I know Walt liked Clifton's. He and the boys would go down there as well. It was a little bit more of a trek than going over to the Tam OShanter, but you know, Walt loved Salisbury steak and red Jell-O and things like that. And so I'm sure he was very fond of the food down there at Clifton's, and having that kind of redwood forest and the woodland animals and everything. I'm sure that really appealed to him and made him think a little later that that might be a good idea to do some immersive fantasy, you know, scene people could enjoy.
When I first walked in, it had this instant time capsule. It transported you to a different era, a different place. You walked through the doors and you had entered this mystical, mythical location. So I fell in love with it instantly.
Over the decades, Clifton's cafeteria has had a few facelifts, but years of renovation and restoration have brought it to its current incarnation, known simply as Clifton's.
People get to enjoy themselves and be on a true adventure within the single building, because it's 5 stories of different occupancies, and you can actually get lost amongst the collections.
Like a slice of a giant redwood tree, an actual meteorite, and of course, lots and lots of wild animals. Clifton's truly is a cabinet of curiosities.
The Hollywood Brown Derby was a very famous restaurant in Hollywood, and Walt was friends with the owner.
The owner was Bob Cobb, creator of the Cobb salad, and the chain of Brown Derby restaurants was not only famous for its celebrity clientele, but also for the programmatic architecture of their original Wilshire Boulevard location in the shape of a giant derby hat.
Fun and Fancy Free, which included Mickey and the Beanstalk. At the very end, Willie the Giant ends up walking through the streets of Hollywood and, of course, sees a giant hat, which was the Brown Derby, and picks it up and puts it on. And so that was a nod also to that very special restaurant. They also, of course, did a nod to it later. Disney did a nod to it when we did Disney's Hollywood Studios down in Florida, and there's a Brown Derby restaurant down there that's a pretty faithful recreation of the interior of that restaurant.
Sadly, the original restaurant was demolished in 1980, but if you look closely at the shopping center on Wilshire and Alexandria, you can still see the top of that old derby hat.
Well, now that we've eaten at Walt's favorite spots,
it's time we journey to Griffith Park to visit Walt's Carolwood Barn and visit the very spot where the idea of Disneyland all began. Next.
Ion LA is powered by Jeep Compass. With 30 highway MPG, you can go places you only dreamed of going. Come along as we navigate our way through more of Walt Disney's footsteps in LA in this Jeep Compass LA Spotlight.
by the late 1930s, the Disney brothers had made quite a name for themselves in the animation world, but Walt's love for his young daughters would spark a whole new idea.
Walt Disney needed a bigger home, and so he found a nice little hilltop area on Woking Way in the Los Feliz Hills and built a home from scratch. He helped design it and actually had some of the architects here from the studio help with it. Kind of has the feel of a chalet, and that's where he had a little house built for his girls. It was very whimsical.
In 1937, just down the road from Woking Way, a merry-go-round was relocated from San Diego to Griffith Park.
The Griffith Park merry-go-round is one of the spots that Walt kind of got inspiration for creating Disneyland.
Well, it came about when my daughters were very young, and Saturday was always Daddy's Day with the two daughters. And I would take them to the merry-go-round, and as I'd sit on a bench, I felt that there should be something built, some kind of an amusement enterprise built where that the parents and the children could have fun together.
As ideas for this new enterprise grew, so did the fortunes of his studios. And in 1948, Walt and Lillian bought themselves a 25th anniversary present, their dream home on Carolwood Drive in Holmby Hills, with a very special backyard.
Welcome to Walt Disney's Carolwood Barn. This little barn was built in 1950 in what was then Walt Disney's backyard in Holmby Hills. It was his workshop, it was his clubhouse, you could even describe it as a man cave, and this is where he would come on the weekends to relax.
And relaxing for Walt meant one thing: trains. He loved trains, and the barn was ground control for Carolwood Pacific Railroad, Walt's very own backyard playground.
The full layout covered a couple of acres. There was a fairly good-sized figure 8 down in the lower area below the house. Walt called that Yen Sid Valley. I don't know if I have to tell people what Yen Sid means, but it's Disney backwards. He had one engine, the Lily Bell. He had named it after his wife Lily because he wanted her to love the trains as much as he did. But the family made arrangements for this barn to be brought here to Griffith Park as a tribute to Walt Disney's love of trains and his love of this humble little barn. The switcher board is the one that Walt used when he was operating his backyard railroad. The layout had 11 switches, all perfectly scaled, and in that way he could operate the train from right here in the barn. For the most part, when he was here, he was just enjoying himself with friends. He was not Walt Disney, the famous filmmaker. He was Walt, showing his friends a good time.
From the trains he so admired to the tools of his trade, this tiny barn is like a giant Walt Disney time capsule. There's Walt's Morse code tapper, his trademark hat, and other personal items, as well as creations paying homage to the genius of Disney.
The Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland was one of Walt Disney's first really big, extravagant attractions.
Yes, that childhood love of trains would come full circle. Today, the railroad is still the heartbeat of Disneyland, but you can also still visit the little barn where it all began.
And this was a humble little barn, and it was very much representative of Walt Disney's Midwestern roots.
Well, now that he had the idea for a fantasy land that just had to have a train, Walt put his plans into motion.
The first thing Walt needed to do was find a location, one that was close to a major highway, where the land was affordable and spacious enough to match his dreams. Back in the 50s, the little town of Anaheim fit the bill.
Disneyland took about a year to build, and it opened on July 17, 1955.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is your land.
And it was another one of those situations where people thought, oh, it'll never work, it'll never happen. And it was immediately successful. You know, just opening day, people were climbing over the fences and falsifying tickets to get in. And they thought, well, you know, it's not going to do so great. But it was a huge, huge hit. And within months, they had their first 1 million visitors.
Disneyland transported visitors into the future, under the water, and into the jungle. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen.
It was crazy. It took off, and it's just done nothing but be even more successful every year after that.
Eventually it evolved into what you see today as Disneyland, but it all started from a daddy with 2 daughters wondering where he could take them, where he could have a little fun with them too.
You know what they say about all work and no play. We're checking out the sports Walt loved when we come back. You might say that Walt Disney was a bit of a workaholic, but that doesn't mean there wasn't time for sports.
Walt Disney was not much of an athlete, but he enjoyed sports. And in the 50s, he became a big fan of baseball and became a big fan of the Hollywood Stars, which was an early team in Los Angeles back in the 50s. They played at Gilmore Field in Los Angeles, which is actually over where the farmers market is, off of Fairfax.
Walt was more than a fan. He was also on the Hollywood Stars board of directors, and obviously bitten by the baseball bug. It's no coincidence his good friend and baseball owner Gene Autry set up shop Disneyland adjacent.
When Gene Autry formed the California Angels, Walt was on the board of the Angels as well and was instrumental in bringing them to Anaheim. And of course the Anaheim Stadium then was built for the Angels. And so Walt threw out pitches there and attended a lot of the games in the 60s.
Walt even promoted Angels and Disneyland doubleheaders, taking full advantage of being new neighbors. And this influx of baseball and Disney fans was a brand new ballgame for a once sleepy city.
Yeah, Anaheim was mostly known for agriculture. There was still not a whole lot down there, and so Walt was kind of instrumental in bringing other businesses to the area and made it more of an entertainment destination.
In 1996, the Walt Disney Company purchased the Angels and owned the team for about 7 years. During that time, they won their first World Series. That's a full circle moment that would have made Walt proud.
Walt certainly enjoyed watching baseball, but there's a lesser-known sport that he actually loved to play. And today you can come out and play that same game on the very field he did.
Lawn bowling is a centuries-old game played around the world, but somehow it's still one of the best-kept sports secrets out there.
It's very easy to learn, virtually impossible to master.
Okay.
But you can play it forever.
Right.
And every time you have a good shot, you come back another day.
As a member of the Beverly Hills Lawn Bowling Club, Walt Disney certainly came back again and again. Roxbury Memorial Park is where Walt hung with his crew and tossed around the oddly shaped balls, also known as bowls. They're not perfectly round, so they have a wonky roll. The goal is to get closest to the little white ball, but for a man as famous as Walt was at the time, there might have been a different goal.
He could disappear in plain sight because bowlers back in the 50s and 60s all were white, and unless you really stared, you didn't know who was who. He found great sanctity in the game, and the fact that he could be just one of the regular guys with the regular guys.
Walt is even quoted as saying, "There's a certain camaraderie among lawn bowlers not found in any other sport."
It's just a delight to play, and in its slowness, it's so very exciting. I don't think there's any other sport where men and women are completely equal. It's all about finesse.
Well, Finesse is my middle name.
Oh, how can you do that?
Okay, truth be told, I don't have a middle name, but I can confirm after a little practice, lawn bowling is kind of addicting. And one day, you might even bowl your way to fame in a tournament created in Walt Disney's honor.
The Walt Disney tournament began in 1970. That was the inaugural. And we just completed this year the 47th annual tournament. People come from all over. They love it.
There you go. This is terrific.
Okay, come on, baby, come on.
Watch this shot.
Kermit.
Today, Walt Disney's legacy lives on in many ways.
His creative legacy is that, as long as there's imagination in the world, you can do anything. The thing that's wonderful about this part of Los Angeles is that you could still go to some of these places that Walt Disney frequented. Go sit in table 31 at the Tam OShanter and, have dinner with your family just like he did. Go to Clifton's and enjoy, watching the little animals. And you can go to the Angel Stadium and you can go around Hollywood and see these places that he frequented. You can see where he got his inspiration, and a good percentage of it was here in Los Angeles.
In fact, Disney magic will be forever reflected in the landscape of downtown Los Angeles, where the Walt Disney Concert Hall shines as an architectural masterpiece and one of the world's best concert halls, thanks to an initial gift made by his wife, Lillian. It's a gift to the people of Los Angeles and a tribute to Walt's devotion to the arts and this city.
There's no doubt that Walt Disney was a creative genius, but I think it's safe to say that LA added its own little magic to the mix. For more on the places we visited, go to abc7.com/EyeOnLA. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and remember what Walt said: all our dreams can come true if you have the courage to pursue them. I'm Tina Malave. We'll see you next time.
Jeep Compass is the official vehicle of Eye on LA.